technically impossible. First of all, you can't even list all the ways that you're oppressed. Second, how are you going to weight them? Third, who's going to decide? That's the bloody thing. Who's going to decide? Who's going to decide? That's the thing. You have to fractionate the oppressed all the way down to the level of the individual. Oh, that's what the West figured out. It's not an accident that the axiomatic Western individual is someone who is unfit, cross, and tortured. It's like, yes, right, exactly. That's a truth, you know? My daughter was very ill. She had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, and when she was between the ages of 14 and 16, it first destroyed her hip, which had to be replaced, and then it destroyed the ankle on her other leg, which had to be replaced. She walked around for 2 years on broken legs, and she was taking massive doses of opiates and could hardly stay awake, and she had this advanced autoimmune disease which produced all sorts of other symptoms that were just as bad as the joint degeneration, but which are harder to describe. And so it's just bloody brutal. You know, and as a test of your faith, there's almost nothing that's more direct than a serious illness inflicted upon an innocent child. But what to do in a situation like that? Because everyone is going to have a situation like that in some sense. You know, you'll be faced with illness in the people that you love. And one of the things you do when you're overwhelmed by crisis is you shorten your time frame. You can't think about next month. Maybe you can't even bloody well think about next week, or maybe not even tomorrow. Because now is just so overwhelming that that's all there is. And that's what you do. You cut your time frame back until you can cope with it. And if it's not the next week that you see how to get through, then it's the next day. And if it's not the next day, then it's the next hour. And if it's not the next hour, then it's the next minute. And you know, people are very, very, very tough. And it turns out that if you face things, you can put up with a lot more than you think you can put up with, and you can do it without becoming corrupted. And she did recover because she figured out what was wrong with her and then took the necessary steps to fix it, which is nothing short of a bloody miracle. You have to be alert when you're suffering. You have to be alert to the beauty in life, the unexpected beauty in life. There's this cat that lives across the street from us called Ginger. Cats really aren't domesticated, technically speaking. They're still wild animals, but they kind of like people. God only knows why, but they do, you know? And so Ginger will come wandering over and let you pet her. You know, you have to look for that little bit of sparkling crystal in the darkness when things are bad. You have to look and see where things are still beautiful. You narrow your time frame. You be grateful for what you have. That can get you through some very dark times, and maybe even successfully if you're lucky. But even if unsuccessfully, then maybe it's only tragic and not absolute hell. You can do that, you know, in the worst situation. You can make it only tragic and not hell. There's nothing worse at a deathbed than to see the people there fighting. The death is bad enough, but you can take that, as terrible as it is, and make it into something that's absolutely unbearable. And maybe I think, and this is sort of what I closed the book with, if we didn't all attempt to make terrible things even worse than they are, then maybe we could tolerate terrible things that we have to put up with in order to exist. And maybe we could make the world into a better place, you know? And it's what we should be doing and what we could be doing because we don't have anything better to do. And that's what the book is about. And that's the end of 12 Rules for Life. Thank you. Clinical psychologist, and I've spent 20 hours a week for 25 years listening to people tell me about their lives. And those people were people who were just barely hanging on to the bottom of the world, up to people who were so successful you can hardly believe it. Being a clinical psychologist, if you really listen, is like being immersed in a Dostoevsky novel all the time, you know, because it's amazing what people tell you if you listen to them, because they're so peculiar. Like, they're like penguins or rhinoceroses or ostriches. They're unlikely creatures. Well, you got to improve, right? And you might think, well, I'm a real fixer-upper and I'm really embarrassed about that because there's 50 things wrong with me, and like, look at that guy, and so now I feel all terrible because of the comparison and all of that. And first of all, it's unfair, especially by the time you're about 30. Your life has become quite idiosyncratic. Let's say your life has 8 dimensions: family, friends, intimate relationships. You're individually positioned in all those dimensions. Your life isn't like anyone else's life. So you see someone who's doing better than you, it's like you're only seeing one dimension at one slice of time. So it's not reasonable. You don't have the whole picture. And then you get down on yourself and take the spirit out of yourself, and you get bitter and resentful. There's nothing good about that. But you do need to improve. There's not as much of you as there should be. So what's the comparison? Well, that's easy. Just say, okay, well, here's my position in time and space right now. Here's my virtues and fault. I can be a little bit better tomorrow in some minor way. Well, that's the right comparison, because you are very much like you. Everything's the same about you. Everything's the same about you. And so it's the perfect comparison. You just don't have insight into the tragedy of someone else's life. You might think, well, he's rich and successful. It's like, yeah, but you just don't know. You don't know what his relationship is with his wife or his children. You know, you don't know that he's gone through 2 divorces and his daughter won't talk to him and one of his kids is schizophrenic. And the point is, you should be better than you are, but it's not because you're worse than other people. It's because you're not everything you should be. And so you got to pick the comparison right. And then that's also ennobling and instantly hopeful. There is absolutely no doubt that you can be slightly better tomorrow than you are today. There is definitely something that you can do today that will make you slightly better for the next day. Always. Okay. You're 85, you have Alzheimer's, you know, you're done. Sometimes you're done. Most of the time you're not, and most of the time there's something within your grasp that you could put right. See, that's the fundamental issue. It's like life is tragic. It's full of suffering and it's full of malevolence. There's no doubt about that. And it's brutal. It's more brutal than you can even imagine in some ways, or willing to imagine. But there's something you could put right. And we don't know what would happen if you put everything you could right, if you put it right. And then we don't know what would happen if everyone did that. But you can be certain that it would be less tragic and less malevolent. And so, like...
You don't have anything better to do.